The Psychic type has been around since the very beginning of the Pokemon TCG, and being one of the originals, it has tons of history. So let's go over some of the most powerful of this type. Starters list off at number 10, we have Mewtwo. This specific Mewtwo was released as a promo card to commemorate the first Pokemon movie release, and was given out to fans who were watching the first Pokemon movie in theaters. This Pokemon has 70 HP and 2 attacks. The first being Energy Absorption. For 1 Psychic Energy, it allows you to pick up 2 energy cards from your discard pile and attach them to itself. This attack was useful for getting energy into Mewtwo to use its second attack, Psyburn. Psyburn required 2 Psychic Energy and 1 colorless and did 40 damage. While this may seem underwhelming by today's standards, this was a very powerful attack during the time, as Pokemon typically had much lower HP. Being able to accelerate energy to itself was very strong, and made this Mewtwo a very strong attacker. Mewtwo being a Psychic type meant that it was able to knock out the very powerful Hitmonchan from base set, because of its weakness to Psychic types. With the help of cards such as Computer Search and Professor Oak, you were easily able to get energy into the discard pile and then threaten a turn 2 Psyburn. And what especially made this card viable in the old days of Pokemon was the fact that it could play around energy removal to an extent. You see, early Pokemon had tons of energy removal, so using high energy attacks wasn't really possible. So Mewtwo being able to just fill himself up outside of attaching 1 energy per turn made it actually playable. Overall, this card was great during its time, because it was able to power itself up as long as you had energy in your discard, and it was able to do a good amount of damage. And at number 9, we have Mew EX from Legend Maker. This card had a multitude of unique uses because of its versatile Pokebody. This Pokebody allowed Mew EX to use attacks of any other Pokemon in play, as long as you had the necessary energy to use the attack. This was very powerful as you were able to copy 80 strong attack while only having to power up 1 Pokemon. Attacking with Mew EX also allowed you to attack with an alternative typing and sometimes would allow you to hit for Psychic weakness on anything that was weak to Psychic. The power of Mew EX's versatile Pokebody was shown at Worlds when the deck that won the World Championship 2006 featured Mew EX and Manectric. This deck used Mew to copy Manectric EX's powerful Disconnect attack. For 1 Lightning and 1 Colorless Energy, the attack did 40 damage and prevented your opponent from playing trainer cards except for supporters from their hand during the next turn. This made for an incredibly strong turn 2 for you and locked your opponent out of the game. Years later, in the Dragon's Exalted set, Mew EX was printed, which had the same versatile ability as the original Mew EX. It saw great success as a way to knock out Pokemon with Psychic weakness, and was often paired with Zoroark GX as a way to counter the powerful Buzzwole GX, which was conveniently weak to Psychic. Overall, this card was great because it allowed you to use a plethora of different attacks and also allowed you to hit for different weaknesses. And at number 8, we have Trevenant and Dusknoir GX. This card was in a promo box and has a very strong attack. Its attack, Night Watch, costs 3 Psychic Energy and deals 150 damage. It also allows you to pick 2 random cards from your opponent's hand and shuffle them back into the deck. This attack is extremely powerful in combination with cards that allow you to reduce your opponent's hand size, such as Ace Trainer, which could only be played if you had more prize cards remaining than your opponent, but had the strong effect of having both players shuffle their hand into the deck and allow you to draw 6 cards while leaving your opponent with 3 cards in hand. Following that up with Trevenant and Dusknoir's Night Watch would leave them with 1 card going into their turn, making it very difficult for them to really do anything. It also has the GX attack Pale Moon, which costs 1 Psychic and 1 Colorless Energy, and knocked out your opponent's active Pokemon at the end of your opponent's next turn. If you had 1 extra Psychic Energy attached to Trevenant and Dusknoir, it would also remove all energies attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. It wasn't super common to use the Pale Moon, but sometimes it was a viable option if you didn't think your opponent had a way to switch their active Pokemon. This card ended up being paired with a plethora of different cards throughout its lifespan. The first real deck that played this very powerful card was in the expanded format, where it was paired with Milotic. This card was a stage 1 that allowed you to knock itself out and attach 3 basic energy from your discard pile to any one of your non-EX Pokemon. Not only did this power up Trevenant and Dusknoir GX, but this also forced your opponent to take a prize card, which activated Ace Trainer. This combo eventually led to the banning of Milotic in the expanded format. Later down the line, it was often played as a one-of in any Shadow Rider Clarax VMAX deck as a way to disrupt your opponent's hand. Overall, this card's attack made it one of the best Psychic types we've ever seen, and will go down in history as one of the most oppressive attackers we have ever seen as well. And at number 7, we have Dusknoir from Diamond and Pearl base set. This card has a very unique ability that forces your opponent to play around it if it was ever on the board. Dusknoir has the Pokepower Dark Palm, which allows you to pick 1 of your opponent's bench Pokemon and shuffle it back into their deck, but only if they have 4 or more bench Pokemon. This Pokepower was extremely powerful, as it allows you to pick which Pokemon they shuffle in. This meant that you could pick whatever Pokemon they had energy cards attached to and shuffle it back into the deck. This now put your opponent behind on energy cards and would require them to re-bench Pokemon and start attaching to it again. This card was very easy to add to any deck that had Rare Candy in it, as it was a stage 2 and adding 2 cards didn't require much deck space. During this time period, you were able to use Rare Candy on the first turn a Pokemon was in play, meaning that you could evolve into Dusknoir at any point during the game. Furthermore, there were many cards that would sit on the bench during this format, such as Azelf and Claydol, leaving to a full bench and allowing you to use Dark Palm. In conclusion, the dependence on support Pokemon in this format made Dusknoir an incredible inclusion in any deck that had the space for it. Overall, this card was amazing for its ability to limit your opponent's bench size and remove potential threats from the board if your opponent played too many Pokemon down. And at number 6, we have Gengar and Mimikyu GX from the Team Up expansion. This card was one of the first tag team cards to be released alongside other powerful tag teams, such as Pikachu and Zekrom GX. At first, this card seemed rather underwhelming, but as time went on, this card became more and more useful. Its GX attack, Horror House GX, prevented your opponent from playing cards in their hand during the next turn, but if you had one extra Psychic Energy attached to it, they would draw until they had 7 cards in hand. This works perfectly with its Poltergeist, which does 50 damage times the number of trainers they have in hand. Both of these cards are fantastic, but the GX attack is what most people were using the card for. By using the GX attack, you were pretty much given an extra turn, which meant you now had more chances to play supporters and attach energy. Gengar and Mimikyu GX were paired with Trevenant and Dusknoir GX to fully lock your opponent out of the game. You would use Gengar and Mimikyu GX's GX attack to prevent your opponent from playing any cards. Then, the following turn, use the previously mentioned Milotic to attach energy onto your Trevenant and Dusknoir, and then play Ace Trainer to reduce your opponent's hand size down to 3. Then, using Night Watch to reduce their hand size to 1 card, going into their second turn of the game. This combo created one of the most broken decks that has ever won a major tournament. Gengar Mimikyu GX's GX attack makes it one of the best Psychic types ever, because it essentially allows you to get a whole extra turn again for the low cost of 1 Psychic Energy. And at number 5, we have Mewtwo and Mew GX from the Unified Minds expansion. This card has a similar ability to the previously mentioned Mew EX. Mewtwo and Mew GX has the ability Perfection, which allows it to use the attacks of any GX or EX Pokemon on your bench or in your discard pile. This allows you to play a wide variety of attackers that would be useful in all kinds of different situations, especially being able to use the attacks of powerful Stage 2 Pokemon without evolving into them. A few examples are Solgaleo GX's Turbo Strike attack, which did 120 damage and allowed you to attach up to 2 basic energies from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. This was a solid 2 energy attack that also allowed you to help set up your bench Pokemon. Furthermore, you also had other great cards, such as Latios GX's Tag Purge attack, which did 120 damage and prevented damage from your opponent's tag team Pokemon during their turn. This was crucial as during the time, there were many other tag team decks, and being able to prevent damage from them was strong. This card was played from the day it became standard legal to the day it rotated because of how versatile it was. And at number 4, we have Tapu Lele GX from the Guardians Rising expansion. This card is phenomenal because of its Wonder Tag ability, which allows you to search your deck for a supporter when you bench it. It also has the attack energy drive for 2 colorless energy, which does 20 damage times the number of energy attached to both active Pokemon, but it does not hit for weakness or resistance. This attack being on a support Pokemon was amazing, as it allowed any deck that played Tapu Lele GX to have a decent attacker in some situations. This card was in most decks in standard format when it was legal, since it allowed you to search for supporters such as Bridget, which allowed you to search your deck for 1 basic EX Pokemon, or 3 basic non-EX Pokemon. Since GX were not EX Pokemon, you were able to search out multiple basic GX Pokemon using Bridget. You could also use it to search Guzma, which allowed you to choose one of your opponent's Pokemon and bring it to the active, while also switching your active with one of your bench Pokemon. This card was super strong at the time. This card's success for the entirety of its time in standard because it allowed you to search for supporters to let you set up your board, target your opponent's Pokemon on the bench, or find a one-off supporter that couldn't normally be found in niche scenarios. This card is not only one of the best Psychic-type Pokemon we've ever seen, but is also arguably one of the best support Pokemon we've ever seen printed, because of its amazing ability which helped with consistency, and an attack that was easily usable by any deck it was played in. And at number 3, we have Uxies from Legends Awaken. This card has a really good ability which made it a staple in almost every deck from its release to the day it rotated out of the standard format. Its ability, Set Up, allows you to draw until you have 7 cards in your hand when you play Uxie onto the bench. This ability eventually was printed again on Shaman EX from Roaring Skies. Both cards were played in almost every deck, but Uxie's was the better of the 2 cards because it only gave up 1 prize if it was knocked out. Uxie's attack, Psychic Restore, was also very useful. For 1 colorless energy, you did 20 damage and could put Uxie and all cards attached to it to the bottom of your deck in any order. This attack allowed you to potentially reuse the same Uxie over and over to continue to refill your hand back to 7 cards. This also allowed you to reduce the amount of Pokemon you had in play to play around the previously mentioned Dusknoir's Dark Palm ability. Furthermore, you could use cards such as Super Scoop Up, which lets you flip a coin and if heads, pick up a Pokemon from your board. This meant that you could reuse the same Uxies over and over if you kept flipping heads. You could also just draw into another Uxie and draw even more cards. Overall, Uxie's ability to add consistency to your deck and its amazing and easy to use attack both made this card fantastic. And at number 2, we have Mewtwo EX from Next Destinies. This card was a game-breaking card during its time. Its attack X-Ball for 2 colorless energy did 20 damage times the number of energy attached to both active Pokemon. This was an incredibly strong attack at the time, as most attackers in the format required multiple energy to attack. Having 170 HP made it hard to knock out at the time, which led this to being an incredible attacker. Furthermore, in Next Destinies, double colorless energy was reprinted, which meant that you could attack with Mewtwo EX by attaching one double colorless energy to it. Mewtwo EX having weakness as Psychic types led to the term Mewtwo Wars, being used to describe when players would have to use Mewtwo EX to knock out Mewtwo EX continuously. Double colorless energy guaranteed at least 40 damage plus 20 more for each energy on your opponent's active, meaning that if they had 2 energy attached to their Pokemon, you were able to do 80 damage. Most Pokemon at the time weren't able to knock out Mewtwo EX consistently, making Mewtwo EX's X-Ball attack very strong to 2-shot Pokemon. Later down the line, Mewtwo EX was paired with Darkrai EX. This was because Mewtwo EX was easily splashable into any deck because X-Ball required 2 colorless energy. This card was phenomenal during its time because it had an easy to use attack, a massive 170 HP, and was able to KO opposing Mewtwo EXs. And at number 1 on our list, we have Gardevoir from Secret Wonders. This card is not only the best Psychic-type Pokemon, but arguably one of the best cards of all time. It has an insane Pokepower and an amazing attack. Its ability Telepass allows you to, once per turn, use the effect of a supporter card in your opponent's discard pile. Gardevoir's attack Psychic Lock deals 60 damage for 1 Psychic and 2 colorless energy, and prevents your opponent from using any Pokepowers during their next turn. This shut off cards like Uxie and Claydol, both of which help draw more cards. On top of that, you're still able to play supporter from your hand after using Telepass, essentially giving you a second supporter every turn. Being able to play that second supporter every turn is a huge advantage, as you're able to just see more cards in your opponent on any given turn. For example, you were able to copy supporters such as Bebe's Search, which allowed you to put a card from your hand on top of your deck and then search your deck for a Pokemon, or copy something like Roseanne's Search, which lets you search your deck for any 2 combinations of basic Pokemon or basic energy. Both of these cards allowed you to set up your board and search for more energy or Pokemon. Furthermore, any supporter card that was played by your opponent was now able to be used by you, which meant that if they played a card such as Judge, you were now able to use Telepass to Judge and still be able to play another supporter from your hand, and then finish your turn by using the Psychic Lock to prevent your opponent from using any Pokepowers during their turn to draw more cards. Overall, this card's insane ability and amazing attack made it the best Psychic-type card ever printed. Alright, and that's the video. If there are any other Psychic-type Pokemon you think we may have missed, or have any ideas for future videos just like this one, please let us know down in the comments below.